US President Donald Trump has doubled down that the US is winning the war with Iran. He assured that the US military is achieving its military objectives in its war against Iran, suggesting that Tehran was desperately looking for a deal. Now, speaking at a Miami event sponsored by a Saudi sovereign wealth fund, Trump said that the US was going after targets as it was controlling Iranian airspace. He added that the US has another 3,554 targets left and that they will be hit very quickly.
We're crushing Iran's currently as we speak. I just looked. We had another big day. We hit them. They don't know what's happening. Remember this. They lied about 3 days ago. I said, yeah, we're negotiating with Israel. We are not negotiating. They're being hit so hard, anybody would be negotiating. They are negotiating. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. Turned out I was right. They were negotiating, which they admitted 2 days later.
Trump also claimed that Iran is no longer a bully and called on the country to open the Strait of Hormuz, referring to it as the Strait of Trump.
And then they actually said, we're going to add an extra 2. And they added an extra 2, so we had 10 ships. And then people realized we were actually negotiating. We're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up. They have to open up the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, in his speech, Trump again expressed his displeasure with NATO over not joining forces against Iran. He said that the US spent hundreds of billions of dollars per year on NATO, but that now US was abandoning them based on their actions.
But I think a tremendous mistake was when NATO just wasn't there. They just weren't there. It's going to make a lot of money for the United States because we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on NATO, hundreds of protecting them. And we would have always been there for them. But now, based on their actions, I guess we don't have to be, do we?
Parallel to this, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said he expects Washington's war objectives in Iran to be completed in the next couple of weeks, regardless of whether the U.S. sends ground troops. Following the G7 talks in Paris, Rubio said that once the operations are completed, Iran would be weaker than it has been in recent history.
As the Department of War has consistently outlined, we are on or ahead of schedule on that operation and expect to conclude it at the appropriate time here in a matter of weeks, not months. And the progress is going very well. Obviously, we have some work to do. We have to finish the job, and we are finishing that job. I did describe to our allies.
Rubio suggested that Iran may decide to set up a tolling system for the Strait of Hormuz. He said that any such move by Iran would not only be illegal but unacceptable. He went on to say that the world needed to confront Iran's dangerous plan.
There are some in the Iranian regime that are going around saying that they want to make the Strait of Hormuz tolling thing. They want to make it permanent. That's unacceptable. The whole world should be outraged by it. We're impacted by it a little bit, but the rest of the world is impacted by it a lot more, including many of the countries represented today here at the G7. And so if those countries are deeply impacted by it, all we've said is, you guys need to do something about it.
In a joint statement, the G7 foreign ministers reiterated the absolute necessity to permanently restore safe and toll-free freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. They also called for an immediate cessation of attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff expressed optimism about the possibility of talks with Iran. In the same Miami event where Donald Trump spoke, Witkoff said he believes Iran will hold talks with Washington this week.
Well, my definition of real negotiating would be right here, and we don't leave until we're done. And we've offered that, and we think there will be meetings this week. We're certainly hopeful for it. Ships are passing. That's a very, very good sign. And I think the president wants a peace deal.
To discuss more, we are now being joined by Dr. Abner Cohen. He's professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at the Middlebury Institute. Dr. Cohen, thanks very much for joining us live on this broadcast. Now, recently there has been a shift in tone when it comes to the US and especially US President Donald Trump when it comes to Iran. But so on the ground, matters seem to be escalating and there continue to be strikes and counterstrikes. Now, this leads to more escalation on the ground, sir.
Well, there is a threat for more escalation right now. There is troops that's on their way. Some arrived, some will be arriving. The problem is that as of now, the entry position of both the United States and Iran are far apart, maybe even ocean apart. And it will be very, very difficult to make a deal that both sides could appear somewhat satisfied. And it seems that Iran is ready for attrition war. And it seems that as much as Iran tactically and locally is beaten everywhere, essentially, both Israel and the United States dominating the air over the entire Iran or most of the Iran, and yet Iran is not ready to capitulate and to agree to the condition that the United States is asking. In fact, it's asking totally unacceptable conditions, including reparations from the United States. So there is interest to talk, but how far the talk could go, it's open questions. And it's also interesting to know that so far there is no direct talk. The talk is via mediators, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and others, but so we'll see.
Right. So you say that Israel and the US are dominating the skies over Iran, but Iran does continue to counterstrike, and American soldiers have been wounded in Saudi Arabia.
Correct. There is no way to compare the way that each side hits the other one. Iran is very, very badly damaged. Essentially, much of its infrastructure in terms of productions of military equipment, munitions, all sorts of elements of war have been degraded very significantly. Iran was able to hit here and there some American targets, including embassies, but there is no way to compare. But the fact is that Iran is able to somewhat to function. It's able to engage nearly 10 countries. Recently, they even engaged Lebanon, who threatened to expel Iran's ambassador. And Iran is not ready to, as I mentioned, is not ready to capitulate.
Right. Dr. Cohen, I would just like to add that at this point, it seems like the US is more willing to hold a dialogue with Iran after we've seen almost a month, actually a month almost, we have seen the war has been escalating. So right now the US is more willing to hold a dialogue. So do you think that push will see both of them getting on the table anytime soon?
I think there is interest on both sides to talk. And I think that both sides would like to find something that would allow at least a temporal ceasefire to have, in order to have more serious conversation, to get some kind of framework agreement. Whether it's enough for both sides to have enough sense of satisfaction, enough sense of requirement fulfilled, it's an open question. I don't think that's the case. And I think the United States, because of that, will have to show more to Iran that Iran is indeed... Iran does not have a sense it's a defeated state. Both the United States and Israel feel that they have beaten Iran in so many ways and so many times and for over 4 weeks, and yet Iran is breathing and is not ready to recognize itself as a defeated state. What's interesting also is the fact that many of the neighboring states, including Saudi Arabia and most of the, perhaps all of the Gulf states, asking for the United States, don't leave it before Iran senses itself as being defeated. And that may take time.
Right, Dr. Cohen. Now, coming to the Strait of Hormuz, that continues to be the focal point or one of the focal points of this war. The UN has now created a task force, and although they have stated that it is only for humanitarian assistance at this point, can it be seen as a sign of positive things to come, especially for the US?
I don't think so. I think what the United Nations offering is does not have any practical significance at the present time. It's something after will be some kind of agreement. The United Nations would like to show it's relevant right now. Right now, it's not. I think the European also offers some kind of help after the conflict would be, at least would be temporarily suspended, let alone ended. But as of now, the Iranians are not ready to either to allow it a very selective way of passage of ships, and essentially, for all practical purposes, the straits are closed to any country which is not friendly, is not ready to accept Iranian terms.
Right. So you also mentioned that Donald Trump has been frustrated with NATO. So when it comes to the American allies, NATO, do you think there is a sense of frustration from the U.S. about their involvement, and do you see that changing in the near future?
No, and that could be a very deep fracture that could lead ultimately to either the end of NATO or NATO becoming a very, very tiger of paper, very weak entity. I think that as long as Donald Trump is in power, I do not see a real reconciliation between NATO and the United States. Given what happened vis-a-vis Greenland a few months ago, and now the very cautious approach of the European, which none of them have been consulted before the United States and Israel decided to attack Iran, I do not see any time, any rapprochement, any reconciliation between the European side of NATO and the United States. Right.
So coming back to the question of dialogue and diplomacy, which country do you think can be seen as a major player when it comes to mediation? Right now, Pakistan is involved in the talks, but we haven't seen any further development. Do you think any other country can play a major role when it comes to pushing both parties involved on the table?
It's interesting that until the hostilities started, Oman was the preferred mediator for Iran. It is no longer so. Oman has been attacked, among other countries, relatively less than the United Arab Emirates, less than Kuwait and Qatar, but nevertheless it was attacked. Right now, the mediator, in addition to Pakistan, are Egypt to a degree, and Turkey. I think Pakistan also geographically situated in such a way that it will be easy if there is enough agreement to meet with the vice president, J.D. Vance. You can allow some kind of free passage for senior Iranian representative. I think they're literally scaring to fly west, to fly to Istanbul, let alone to fly to Geneva or elsewhere. So it's almost geographically, Pakistan is the safe way to go east rather than west.
Right, Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for your valuable insights. As always, we'll of course continue tracking this ever-escalating conflict. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.